Three words. That's how the Constitution begins. Three words that are arguably the most important words ever written in the history of the American government. We, the people. Not we the majority, not we the donors, not we the party that won the last election. We, the people. The framers were deliberate about those words. They had just lived through a government that served the crown, that made decisions for some people while excluding others. They had fought a war over it. And when they sat down to build something new, they made a choice. This government would derive its power from everyone, not a faction, not a class, everyone. That was the promise. So let me ask you something. When the government shuts down, not once, not twice, but repeatedly in the same year, who pays the price? TSA officers show up to work without a paycheck. FEMA sits idle while the disaster relief fund drains. Coast Guard members protect American waters without knowing when the rent will be covered. Small business owners who built their entire operations around serving the federal government watch invoices go unpaid for weeks, sometimes months, with no back pay guarantee, no safety net, nothing. These are not abstractions. These are Americans doing American work, caught in a machine that was supposed to serve them, and instead is using them as leverage. I am Mucho Balida. This is the third voice. And today we're going to ask the question that most political commentators on both sides are too afraid to ask plainly. Who is this government actually governing for? Let me give you the facts of where we are, stripped of the partisan framing that every other channel is giving you. The Department of Homeland Security has been partially shut down since February 14th of this year. That's over 40 days, the longest partial shutdown in American history. More than 100,000 DHS employees, including 50,000 TSA officers, have been working without full paychecks. TSA agents have been forced to work without pay for nearly half of this entire fiscal year. Over 400 officers have quit. The call-out rate is 5 times higher than normal. At Houston's Hobby Airport, more than half the TSA workforce called out on a single day. At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, one of the busiest airports in the world, travelers were told to arrive 3 hours early just to make their flights. And here's the detail that stopped me cold when I read it. TSA officers, the people checking your bags, keeping you safe, doing the job Congress mandated them to do, were working their shifts alongside cardboards asking travelers to bring canned goods, gift cards, baby formula for the screeners themselves. Federal workers begging for food donations while doing their constitutional duty. Now, how did we get here? This shutdown was triggered by a political impasse over immigration enforcement reform. Democrats demanded oversight changes to ICE operations following several violent incidents. Republicans refused, calling the demands extreme and dangerous to border security. Both sides dug in. Congress left for a scheduled recess, and the shutdown began. But here's what I need you to notice, and this is the constitutional mechanics most channels will not explain to you. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress one non-negotiable, foundational duty above almost everything else. Fund the government. That's it. That is the core legislative power. the power of the purse. The framers gave it to Congress specifically, not the president, not the courts, because they believed that the body closest to the people should control the money. And when Congress fails that duty, when it uses the funding process as a hostage in a political negotiation, it is just failing politically. It is failing constitutionally. It is abandoning the job the document gave it. This is not a Democrat failure. This is not a Republican failure. This is a Congress failure. And it keeps happening because the system has quietly accepted that shutdowns are a legitimate negotiating tool. They are not. They never were. And the Constitution never intended them to be. Now I want to talk about something that happened this week that I believe is one of the most constitutionally significant moments of this entire shutdown, and almost nobody is framing it that way. Elon Musk, the wealthiest person in the world, went on social media and offered to pay the salaries of TSA workers. His exact words? I would like to offer to pay the salaries of TSA personnel during this funding impasse that is negatively affecting the lives of so many Americans. The President of the United States responded publicly. I'd love it. Let him do that. Senators from both parties called the offer generous. The offer was taken seriously inside the White House. Officials debated routing the money through a federal account called, and this is real, Give to the United States Government, an account created in 1843. The offer was ultimately rejected because federal law bars outside individuals from paying government employees directly, and because Musk companies hold billions of dollars in government contracts, which created an ethics conflict. But I want you to see what almost happened. The United States government, the wealthiest, most powerful government in the history of the world, almost accepted a private donation from a billionaire to perform its most basic constitutional function, paying the people who work for it. This is not the first time. During the first shutdown this year, an anonymous private donor gave $130 million to the U.S. government to help pay military troops. Private money. Paying soldiers because Congress couldn't do its job. And right now, private money is funding renovations to the White House ballroom. Do you see the pattern? When the government repeatedly fails to fund itself, when private wealth steps in to fill the vacuum, we are no longer talking about the budget dispute. We are talking about a structural question about who actually holds power in this country. The Constitution does not say we the people unless a billionaire steps up. The power of the purse belongs to Congress, elected by the people, accountable to the people, not to whoever happens to be wealthy enough and willing enough to write a check. The moment we normalize private funding of public government functions, even in crisis, even with good intentions, we have quietly transferred sovereignty from the people to the wealthy. And that transfer has no constitutional basis whatsoever. Who runs this country? Congress or whoever can afford to keep the lights on? I want to go deeper now, because the shutdown is a symptom. What I really want to talk about is the disease. Why does this keep happening? Why in the wealthiest nation on earth, with the oldest written constitution still in operation, does Congress keep reaching impasses it cannot resolve? I want to offer you a framework, not a partisan one, a constitutional one. The framers designed this system around one unavoidable requirement, compromise, not as a weakness, as a feature. The House and Senate, two chambers with different compositions, one proportional, one equal, so that no single interest could dominate without building a coalition broad enough to represent most Americans. The filibuster, the veto, the override, all of these are friction mechanisms deliberately designed to slow things down and force negotiation. The framers weren't naive. They knew factions would form. They built the system to require those factions to deal with each other. So when the system produces impasse after impasse, when the answer is always take it or leave it, and never let's find the middle, the question we have to ask is, why has the incentive to compromise disappeared? Here's my answer, and I want you to sit with it. Compromise disappears when the people doing the governing are not governing for everyone. When your policies only need to work for your coalition. When the Americans who will be harmed by an impasse are not the Americans whose votes you need, there is no incentives to move. You can afford the shutdown because the people paying the price aren't the people holding you accountable at the ballot box. Think about who bears the cost of every shutdown. Federal workers living paycheck to paycheck, government contractors, small businesses, many of them minority-owned, many of them veteran-owned, who built their entire operation around federal contracts and have no back pay guarantee when Congress fails. Travelers stuck in 3-hour airport lines, families in disaster zones waiting for FEMA to respond, Coast Guard members protecting American waters for free. Now think about who does not bear the cost. Members of Congress continue to receive their salaries during shutdown. The Constitution's 27th Amendment actually makes it difficult to reduce congressional pay. Lobbyists keep working. Donors keep calling. The machinery of political fundraising never shuts down. I am not making a partisan argument. I am making a structural argument. When the people who make the decision do not share the consequence of that decision, the system produces bad decisions. Every time. This is not unique to America. This is how governance fails everywhere in the world, across every era of history. The framers actually understood this. That's why they gave Congress the power of the purse, and why they made members of Congress subject to election every 2 years. The House was supposed to be the most accountable branch, the one that felt the people's angers fastest. What has changed is the distance between representatives and the people they represent. Gerrymandering has created districts so safe that only electoral threat most members face comes from within their own party, from the base, not the broad electorate. And bases, by definition, are factions, not the whole people. When you only have to govern for your faction, you stop governing for everyone. And when you stop governing for everyone, you lose the ability to compromise. Because compromise requires you to care about the person on the other side of the table. That care has a constitutional name. It's called representation. The impasse isn't a failure of politics. It's a failure of representation. I want to step out of the constitutional framework for a moment and tell you something personal. I am not a federal employee. I am a small business owner who provides services to federal government. And during one of the shutdowns earlier this year, my payment was delayed for over a month. I want to be clear about what that means practically. I had delivered the work. The government had received the services. The contract was fulfilled. But because Congress could not agree on a funding bill, the payment system froze. And unlike federal employees who are now at least guaranteed back pay under a 2019 law, contractors have no such protection. If the shutdown ends, we get paid. If it doesn't, that's a business problem. Yours alone. I tell you this not to make this about me. I tell you this because I know there are thousands of people watching this right now who have the same story. Caterers, IT consultants, security firms, cleaning crews, maintenance contractors, people who build their livelihood in good faith around the assumption that the federal government would honor its commitments. The government asks us to trust it. It writes the contracts, it sets the terms. And then, when Congress fails its most basic duty, we absorb the cost, without representation in the negotiation, without protection in the law, without a voice in the room where it happens. That is not we the people. That is some of the people being used as leverage by all the people's representatives. And there is a constitutional word for that too. It's called a failure of the social contract. So what was the remedy the framers designed? I want to be careful here, because I am not going to stand here and tell you that one party needs to give in. That's not a constitutional argument. That's a political preference. And this channel does not do political preferences. What I will tell you is what the document says. The Constitution does not give Congress the option to not fund the government. It gives Congress the duty to fund the government. The Anti-Deficiency Act, passed by Congress itself, actually makes it illegal for federal agencies to spend money that hasn't been appropriated, which means the shutdown isn't just a political failure. It creates a legal paradox. Workers are required to show up. The government is required to function, but the money to make that happen has been withheld by the very branch responsible for providing it. The framers assumed that the friction built into the system, the competing chambers, the veto, the supermajority requirements would force negotiation before deadlines, not after. They did not build a mechanism for what happens when Congress simply refuses to do its job, because they did not believe a Congress of representative Americans would ever let it come to that. What they built instead was accountability. Elections, 2 years for the House, 6 years for the Senate, staggered so that a third of the chambers face voters every 2 years. The assumption was, if Congress fails the people badly enough, the people will replace them. That accountability mechanism still exists. It is still the most powerful tool in the constitutional toolkit, and it only works if the people using it are asking the right question when they walk into the voting booth. Not which party do I belong to, not which candidate did my team endorse, but is this person governing for all of us, or just some of us? The Constitution begins with the people. Those 3 words are not decorative. They are not ceremonial. They are the founding legal claim of this entire system of government. That every American, regardless of party, regardless of income, regardless of where they were born, what they look like, or who they vote for, is entitled to be governed fully, fairly, without being used as a bargaining chip. A TSA officer scanning your bags for free is not a bargaining chip. A contractor waiting 60 days for a payment they earned is not a bargaining chip. A family in a disaster zone waiting for FEMA to answer is not a bargaining chip. A soldier whose salary depends on a private donor's generosity is not a bargaining chip. These are people, American people, and the Constitution was written for them as much as for anyone else in this country. Someone once said that a question without a solution is a question that was poorly asked. I believe that. And I think the reason we keep getting the wrong answers in Washington is that we keep asking the wrong question. We keep asking which side is winning. The right question, the constitutional question, is this: who are we governing for? Are our policies designed to work for all Americans, or are they designed to reward those who are already inside the coalition and punish those who are not? Are we building laws that require broad enough support to pass because they serve broad enough interest? Or are we building laws for some and daring others to stop us? Because here is what I know from studying this document for 15 years, from sitting in federal courtrooms and watching this system work and fail in real time. A government that governs for some eventually stops working for all. The airport lines, the empty paychecks, the donation boxes next to security checkpoints, the billionaire offering to fill the gap Congress left. These are not random events. These are the predictable, inevitable result of a government that has slowly, quietly stopped asking whether everyone is included in the answer. The Constitution hasn't changed. We the people is still the first line. The question is whether the people doing the governing have read it lately. I'm going to leave that question with you, not because I don't have an opinion, but because in a constitutional democracy, this question belongs to you, the voter, the taxpayer, the person standing in the airport line, the contractor waiting on the check, the TSA officer who showed up anyway. It belongs to we the people, and only we the people can answer it. And if this gave you something to think about, share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more. And I'll see you in the next one.